Page 92. The Kuzari, you might not even remember, but for the last, I don't know, maybe 20 pages, he's been on a tangent. You think I'm bad at tangents? We've gone on like a year-long tangent, where we're so out of the original topic of the Kuzari that we probably don't even know what we're coming back to. And that's the whole point of the bottom of 92. The Kuzari says, let's get back to the original subject. But before we talk about the original subject, let's talk about the importance of taking tangents. There have been in Judaism two kinds of books. Books like the Torah, the Mishnah, the Talmud, the Shulchan Aruch, the Rambam. The difference between the Mishnah and the Talmud, do you know what it is? Aside from years, obviously, and the discussions. Tell me what the difference. The Mishnah
is the original writing from that's written down, that came all through the generations from the Old Torah, and the Talmud has all the comments that talk about that.
The discussion, practically, and probably the person who learned
Precision versus expansion, I guess.
Okay, so practically the one who learned the most Talmud here probably is Barry, right? So Barry, the Mishnah is pretty clear cut. It's, do this, do that. The Sukkot, you do this, the Lav, you take that, period, end. The Gemara, you mention the rabbi's name, and the Gemara can spend 2 pages telling you things this rabbi taught, even though they have no relevance to the discussion at hand. And you find there are 2 kinds of books. I call them conversation books and books of law. Maran himself, Rabbi Yosef Karo, has 2 kinds of books. The Bet Yosef, all the discussions of the halakha, and Shulchan Aruch, the code of Jewish law. Which book is more popular?
Shulchan Aruch.
You would think. Among the masses, Shulchan Aruch is more popular. It's easy. This is what I do, this is what I don't do. This is what I do, this is what I don't do. Like the Mishnah. Children learn Mishnayot in school. The Mishnah says this, the Mishnah says that. Talmud, you wait for a later age. Bet Yosef, most Jews have never learned Bet Yosef. How many of you have learned Bet Yosef before? Shulchan Aruch you've learned before. Bet Yosef you don't. The reason is, Bet Yosef is not for everyone.
I never heard of it, actually.
It's the precursor to Maran's book. The Shulchan Aruch, it's all the sources for what he says. Yeah. So much so that the Poskim, some of them say that if you learn Shulchan Aruch without learning the Bet Yosef, you will make serious errors in judgment. And I was once in an argument with a colleague of mine, a rabbi in Jerusalem, and he argued that codes, you know what codes are? Shulchan Aruch, Mishnah, Rambam. Codes are not popular among the Jewish people, and ultimately they become disinterested in them. Whereas the discussion, the conversation books, those are always going to be a hot topic for the Jewish people. Now, I disagree with him because I believe there are always going to be 2 kinds of people in the Jewish people. Scholars and laymen. Scholars will always want to learn more. Laymen will always want to learn exactly what it is they need to know. The Kuzari is not a book for the layman. The Kuzari is not a step-by-step guide to Jewish philosophy. The Kuzari is a discussion. There's no bigger conversation than this book. This book is one long conversation. The nature of conversation, unlike the Shulchan Aruch, where he'll say, okay, now we're talking about washing our hands in the morning. If you want to talk about washing your hands for bread, go look in the other part of my book. The Kuzari, a conversation book, will say, listen, we're already talking about washing your hands in the morning. Why don't we also talk about washing your hands for bread? Later we'll talk more about washing your hands for bread. We'll take a tangent. For some people, taking tangents frustrate them. I can't do it. I want to talk about this. I didn't come to talk about that. And you see it. Sometimes there are such people. But they're missing on the meat of Judaism. They're missing on the flavor of Judaism. They're missing on the conversation of Judaism. When you sit in front of a Bet Yosef or in front of a Gemara, you are a continuation of this discussion. Shulchan Aruch ended when Rabbi Yosef Karo died. The Bet Yosef never ended. The rabbis are still writing the continuation of the Bet Yosef. The Mishnah Berurah, the Chafetz Chaim, Rabbi Chaim, Rabbi Yaakov Chaim Sofer, the Kav Chaim, Rabbi Chaim Palaji, the Ben Ish Chai, Rabbi Akiva Eger, the Vilna Gaon, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe. Everyone had what to add to this. It's a discussion. And when you take a seat at the table, you're not sitting at a table alone reading a dry book. You're here. The Rambam is here. Rabbi Yosef Karo is here. Ravina and Rav Asher are here. Hillel and Shammai are here. Ultimately, Moshe Rabbeinu is here. This book of conversation is very important. And the rabbi is not afraid to take tangents. And normally his tangents are very calculated. Because he could say what he needs to say. But if the person's not willing to accept what needs to be said, so what's the point of saying it? So he took a tangent. He had to help the Kuzari out with certain points in his life. It's a good thing to know to take tangents. But you always have to come back, especially when you get too far away. A person's allowed to swim in the ocean. Personally, I wouldn't. But a person's allowed to swim in the ocean. But if he stops seeing the shore, you better swim back. It says the Sefer HaYetzirah, the book of Kabbalah, tells us, Imratz dibcha, if you see your heart is running too fast, shuv al hamekor, come back to where you started, the origins. If you're learning Judaism and you see these ideas, wow, that's a fanatical idea, it's a crazy idea, it's mind-blowing, but it's not what I've always thought. Make sure it's accurate by bringing it back to the sources, and does it fit up, does it add up to our original sources? Rabbi Peretz, should live to be well, in his books, in his Sfarim at home, not the ones he wrote, the ones he learns, very often you'll find entire paragraphs X'd out. X'd out, and next it says, Lo nachon. It's not right.
In the books.
I mean, he'll read a book from a certain rabbi, and instead of saying, I disagree, he'll just cross it out.
He re-edits them.
Now, you might say that's an audacious thing to do. It is.
It's his book.
It is. Now, one thing with Peretz has a problem, which is a benefit, that he's a man of truth. So he can't own a book that has something that he feels is not true inside of it. But on the other hand, he's also part of a conversation. And when he takes something, wow, that's a fascinating concept, but it doesn't fit with the Torah. Remember Rabbi Uziel and Rabbi Kook, they were arguing about doing autopsies on Jews or not on Jews. And Rav Kook starts saying, according to Kabbalah, Jewish bodies are different. And Rav Uziel stops him in his tracks. This says, but in the Torah, it doesn't differentiate. Hashem says He created all of man, all of humanity, with the Spirit of God, in the image of God. And therefore, Rav Uziel says, I cannot let you get dragged out into the fields of mysticism, into the fields of the metaphysical. You first have to make sure, do all my beliefs match up with the Torah that we have in our hands? That's what the Kuzari does. After being so far away from the shore, you have to swim back to where we started. And this is where we were. So look at 92. Amar HaKuzari, says the Kuzari. Nashuv el inyanenu v'hodieni. Let's go back to the subject and tell me something. איך קמה תורתכם, ואיך פשטה ונראתה, ואיך נתחברו הדעות אחרי אשר היו חלוקות? How did your religion originate and spread? How did it eventually become, top of the 93, universally accepted? Even by those who initially disagreed with it. ובכמה שנים נתייסדה האמונה, ונבנתה עד שנתחזקה ונשלמה. How long did it take your faith to take a root, grow, and become completely strengthened? כי התחלות הדתות מבלי ספק לא תהיינה כי הם ביחידים, שמתגברים לעזור הדבר אשר ירצה אלוהים להראותו, והם הולכים ורבים ונעזרים בעצמם, או שיקום להם מלך עוזר, ויכריח המון על הדבר ההוא. There must have been some evolutionary process, for all faiths undoubtedly begin with a few individuals who fortify themselves so that they can disseminate that which God wants them to. They then gradually grow in number, either because of their own might or because a ruler helps them by forcing the masses to convert to their religion. Now, is he right, by the way, regarding other religions?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's right. Obviously he's right. But not about our religion. Now, our first retort back, what would we tell the Kuzari?
There were 600,000 people who got the Torah. It's not including all the other people.
600,000 men.
Men between 20 and 50.
So double it with ladies, add everyone a kid. Yeah. Really, we know they had 6 kids in Egypt. So you had Bnei Nara.
3 million.
Yeah. Some say over 3 million.
Yeah.
But even 600,000 is an impressive number. Yeah. That's what we would say. And you know the rabbi is not going to tell him that. Not yet. He's going to talk about Har Sinai later. But he's not going to answer back that which you think he should answer, and he has a reason for it. The king's not ready for it yet. But listen to what does happen. The king, the Gemara gives us a phrase. In Jewish literature, Bichlal, there's such a phrase called Kelev Hashav Lekio. A dog that returns to his own vomit. We say dogs are disgusting creatures. They'll throw something up, they'll eat it again. They'll throw it up, they'll eat it again. Another animal has some excrement, they'll smell it. Dogs are filthy things. But it's an incredible thing for me to see people who kiss their dogs in their mouth. It's actually, today is Holocaust Memorial Day, Yom HaShoah.
Today?
Yeah, it was. And you should know, by the way, many of the rabbis in that generation were against making Yom HaShoah today. Because today is Nisan. Right. It's a happy month. They should have at the very least waited until next month. Yeah. I'm not one of the fans of everything has to be on Tisha B'Av. I know that's the traditional Orthodox stance. We only have one day of mourning. It's the 9th of Av. It's not true. We have other days of mourning in our history. We had many other days of mourning, some of which don't apply anymore. But to make a sad day and a happy month, we don't say Tachnun today. We don't. I mean, it's an interesting thing to do that. But okay, and Rav Lau, the father, he said it's important. Now the kids are all coming back to school. If we'd wait until the summer to make Yom HaShoah, the new generation would never learn about the Holocaust. And so you have to make some sacrifices for education. Okay, to each their own. There was a rabbi in Germany in the 1930s who came from Russia to visit Germany. And he saw a German officer. You know, they love dogs in Germany. It was a big thing. Hitler, was murdering Jews, but he was having dog rights movement. He was saving dogs from shelters, from pounds, from the streets. And one of the officers there said, he saw a German officer kissing the dog on the mouth. He said, this is the country that will kill human beings. If their mercy is so misplaced they could kiss a dog on its mouth, this is the kind of country where they can murder people. Now we think in a Jew, 6 million. There are millions and millions and millions of other people who were murdered by the Nazis that we don't even talk about. Non-Jews. I mean, they weren't. I'm not saying to take away the Jews. Stalin. Some estimates say that Stalin and his regime killed between 30 to 50 million people.
I heard 160 from some
Wow.
sources.
Now, the thing about the Soviets is they were very good. Unlike the Nazis who lost the war, and then we got their records, the Soviets did a very good job. But either they didn't write everything down like the Nazis, they were not German like the Nazis, and not all the documents that they had, we have. We don't really know what happened there. I just, forgive me that I'm taking this tangent, but someone wrote down for me, they did the math of how many Jews were killed in the Holocaust. I want to read this to you because it's very important. 6 million Jews were murdered during 6 years. That means 1 million Jews a year. And if in every year there are 12 months, that means that there were 83,000 Jews who were murdered every month. And if in every month we're going to imagine there are 30 days, that means there were 2,800 people that were murdered in every day. 2,800 Jews murdered every day. And if in every day there are 24 hours, that means that 120 people were murdered every hour. And if that means that in every hour there are 60 minutes, 2 people were murdered every minute. Imagine every 30 seconds on your clock, a life is lost. A father, a mother, a sister, a brother, a cousin, an uncle, a baby, an adult, a senior citizen, over and over and over again. It was a killing machine that was motivated out of hatred for us, hatred for the Torah, hatred for the people of Hashem. These people aren't gone. They didn't disappear. It's not that we eradicated the evil from the world. It became politically incorrect to say the things that the Nazis were able to say back then. In most places, you can't talk about it publicly. A politician might have that opinion, but he won't go on record and say it because it's not good for his career. But there will come a day that politically correct things will change, and things will be allowed to be said. It's true.
In England, they took off the
Sure.
status.
And we're seeing here that slowly the world is slipping back into a very dark place. You have to be aware of it. You have to know that we're not here forever. Jews who think we're here forever are making a mistake. Here.
Not for anywhere.
We have one home. And we have to, by the way, work to make that home good for us too. We can't just sit here and pretend it doesn't exist. We do two damages then. We don't let ourselves have a place to go. And we don't make sure that over there it develops properly for us.
And it doesn't have like a mass christening. You heard about Ghana?
Where? Oh yeah, I read them.
It's ridiculous. There were baptisms, the plan of the baptism, and the mayor said, "Oh, it's a democratic state." Democratic, but not Jewish.
Hashem Yishmor. The Jews, we ruin ourselves.
There is Jehovah, whatever, witness. Yeah, and they're abusing the system, and they wanted to do like a mass baptizing on Shabbat.
Wonderful. So by the way, we have just it never ended. This rabbi, I teach from him mostly the whole year.
Our worst enemies.
When I teach Kuzari, a little bit for myself, but a lot from Rabbi Aviner and Rabbi Uri Sharki. They're both students of Rabbi Tzvi Huda Kook, Rav Kook's son. And Urishaki is a rabbi in Bet El. He's a rabbi, or his son was from Bet El. I don't know exactly where he lives, Urishaki. He's a rabbi in Mechon Meir, in Yerushalayim. And Rabbi Sharki's son last night was in a terrorist attack. If you remember last night in the news, there was an Arab who drove his car into a bus stop again and hit two people, a 25-year-old boy and a 20-year-old girl. And the 20-year-old girl is still in the hospital, and the 25-year-old boy passed away in the middle of the night. That's this rabbi's son, Rabbi Uri Sharki's son. His name was Shalom Yochai Sharki. So we wish him Shamash Avram Gan Eden. We learned his father's Torah every week, so we should have it in mind when we learn tonight. Thank his father and him, and wishes the Shamash Havaya, and that Hashem should wipe out all the enemies of his people and of the whole free world.
Amen.
So the Kuzari is like a dog, and this is what I was telling you about the dogs. Took a tangent on dogs. The Kuzari is coming back to his original vomit. He came from a dirty place, from paganism, and he's going back thinking he didn't get the point yet that Judaism is different than anything he's ever heard of before. He didn't get it yet. He's not grasping this concept. So he's going back, the evolution of Judaism. He wants to talk about evolution. And then he starts comparing to other religions. Then every religion, they're individuals that believe in something, they have messages from God, whatever you want to call them. They start to inspire the people around them, they gather a following, they gain momentum, people start to join in mass. Sometimes there's even a ruler who gets involved and forces everybody to become part of this religion. That happened in Christianity, that happened in Islam. And it did not happen to us. But the Kuzari doesn't get it yet. He doesn't know what that means yet. He doesn't know of any other option for religion to come to being. Think about it. How does every movement in the world start?
A small core.
Not just religious, movements like this. Small core, a few people have an idea. And they start to gain momentum. Some die out, but some gain momentum. Even in our Jewish community, we had such movements. People that didn't happen overnight, but slowly there were breakaways. There was a reform movement that broke away, but it didn't start with reform. They didn't wake up one day, we're reformed. They started slowly with an enlightenment movement, as they called it, and a little bit of changing things and tampering with things, and slowly it led to reform, which snowballed into a huge movement in Europe. Huge. In almost every city they were attacking the Orthodox Jews everywhere. That led them to travel over to the New World, to America, which over there they kept snowballing, and you had Jews that went in a few different directions. Some became Reform, some stayed Orthodox, and some decided they want to start a conservative movement. That snowballed. Then later on in history you come up with all kinds of other movements, renewal movement, reconstructionist movement, humanistic movement, all kinds of other breakaways from traditional Judaism. You have Lahavdil in a good way also, the same thing. The Arizal and his Kabbalistic movement. He brings a good message to the world, but one that's not for everyone. It doesn't happen overnight. And he gains momentum. Rav Chaim Vital, you have the Ramak that's around there, you have rabbis that are there, Rav Chaim Vital, a whole following. And they start to build momentum, Rabbi Shlomo Halevy Alkabetz, and suddenly that spreads to the whole world. But it took time. You have Beit Hasidim, the same thing happened. The Baal Shem Tov was a loner in the beginning of his life. It was just him. And then a few other people, and the Baal Shem Tov was in the beginning. There were other tzaddikim before the Baal Shem Tov, the Nistarim. I don't know why Hasidim don't talk about them so much, but they were pre-Baal Shem Tovs. There were a number of tzaddikim that were hidden tzaddikim, and they developed the philosophy of Hasidut until the Baal Shem Tov was the first one who actually exposed it to the masses. But he was the last of the first generations of Baal Shems that existed. And the Baal Shem Tov movement spread into other Chasiduyot, and from that Chasidut you had the Magid, and then the Magid had students. Those students, some of them were the Stoliner Rebbes, the Karliner Rebbes, Karlin. Some of them were the Lubavitcher Rebbes. Some of them, you have different other Rebbes that are around, Rav Melech of Lezhensk, Rav Zushav Anipoli, Rav Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev. And these slowly evolved into something much bigger. But that's how movements start, not how Judaism starts. But the king doesn't get it. He doesn't grasp this idea yet.
It's strange that, like, Islam and Christianity started, especially for like for one person, and just how you described it, but it grew. They grew to be so huge. And Judaism, it started with what you could say would be verifiable. We're just a small group. It's kind of strange.
What do you learn from there?
Hashem said we'll always be small.
What do we learn from there, though?
People don't really want to think. They don't really want to accept the truth. They don't really want to work very hard, maybe. If you just...
I see from there that numbers don't mean anything. You have 1 billion Christians in the world, 1 billion Muslims in the world. 1 billion of those are wrong. So when someone comes, but there's so few Jews, look how many of us there are, then we're right. No, there are a billion other of you that disagree on everything you believe in. Numbers don't mean anything. Judaism has always taught us, Lo telech acharei rabim leraot. Do not follow the masses when they do something wrong. But there's many of them. Normally in a society, when a lot of people agree on something, it makes it right. For example, a democracy. The root of democracy is good because it brings freedom to people. And the root of democracy is evil because it brings corruption to people. We're raised in a world where freedom is a value. Democracy is a value. How could you talk bad about democracy? Democracy allows for all kinds of things. So long as you can get a majority consensus of people to agree on something, it now becomes okay. Someone once said it very well. Democracy means that if we all decide that we're going to take your bike, it's no longer called stealing. So it used to be there was a king. He was a corrupt man. He was a fascist ruler, and he was a absolute monarch, and he would take your money, and it was wrong, but you go fight him. Now you could have the whole country will agree, or a majority of the country will agree on something, and you have no choice but to go along with it. And if you dare argue with it, it could be illegal. You'll be speaking something that's politically correct. You could be charged for a hate crime, for all kinds of things. We look at democracy as if it's the beauty of the world. It's not always. It brought many things to the world, which obviously other movements didn't bring. But it also brought a lot of damage to the world that the other worlds didn't have before. Most movements start like this. Not our religion. Yeah, when you say in the morning, Baruch Hu Eloheinu, blessed is our God, Shebara'anu Lichvodo, who created us in His honor, for His honor. V'natan min hatoim, He separated us from those who are mistaken in the world. V'natan lanu Torah temet, and He gave us a true Torah. V'chayei olam nata b'tochenu, and He gave us the life of eternity inside of us. You should be jumping up in joy or crying. We don't understand how lucky we are. This is an Uvalid Zion.
Life of eternity gave to us. What about? So that means we have an eternal soul. So what about the rest of the world?
We're not talking now about do they have or do they not have. What we know for sure is those of us who follow the Torah, we for sure have. What do they have? That's for a different. It's a good question. Baruch Elohim Shebana Kodesh. We have to be very proud of it. A person says a bracha, Shalom Asani Goy. Dance when you say a bracha. You don't know what you're missing out on. When you say Shalom Asani Goy, you don't mean He didn't make me like that drunkard in the bar downtown. Shalom Asani Goy. He didn't make me, my mother-in-law always says this, He didn't even make me like the most powerful president in the world. I'm better than that. Because I'm Jewish. So it's not politically correct to say this? Remember I told you about the Kuzari? He is not an apologetic. And he's coming to the Kuzari and saying, listen, you don't get it. Your head, it's too thick. You're not understanding what I'm telling you. We are different. Our religion is different. Our Torah is different. And our origins are different anyways. There is no evolution of Judaism. And then he continues.
Too bad we don't have more like you today.
Yeah, right?
Apologizing that they're Jews.
By the way, we have today part of this, those who try to force others to be part of their religion. So you have a non-violent way, perhaps Christian missionaries, they go to campus and they take advantage of weak people who don't know much about Judaism or philosophy or anything else. And then you have people like the Muslims who violently believe that they should force the world. See, in Judaism, we believe if someone violently forces me to become Jewish, I'm not actually Jewish. We have a people like this. Remember, there's a whole nation that joined the Jewish people in Tanakh. Who am I talking about?
Egyptian?
The ones
in the Talmud, we talk about them a lot. The Kutim. The Kutim, they're from the times of Yeshua. What happens?
How they get scared, right?
They were scared. What's going to happen to them? They saw us conquering the land and nations falling to pieces. They got so scared they jumped in and converted to Judaism. But didn't really work out for them. In the Talmud, they're always giving us a hard time because they didn't do it out of love. They did it out of fear. You have, when we leave Egypt, the same thing. What happens then? Egyptians that join us, and they later become something called the Erev Rav. The Erev Rav today is the term for people who are Jewish but hate the Jewish people. We call them the Erev Rav. But really, the Erev Rav were a group of people who felt forced to join Judaism, not out of their desire to join Judaism. You have Many such instances in Purim. V'rabim me'amei haaretz mityahadim. Many Jews, people are not becoming Jews, but becoming Yehudim. They're kind of joining our society. It was not out of idealistic reasons that they were afraid. It's never a good way. We don't believe in that concept. I mean, what's coming out of the Middle East right now, you have two different kinds of Muslims who are fighting with each other. And you don't even understand, what are they fighting about? They don't know what they're fighting about. And they don't understand what's the difference. Sunnis and Shia. They both believe in the same religion. They both have the same prophet. And they're going to war, not just war. They have, you see images of them, it looks like a Holocaust. They line up children and they shoot them all to death. Why? For what? They're Muslims like you. You're not talking here. The Christians, what they do to them, Hashem should save the Christians. The Christians are trying to be so nice to these people. They don't know what they do to Christians in those countries. They don't understand. If you were a Christian with all your love and tolerance, and you would now land in the middle of Iraq or Iran or Syria or Lebanon, Egypt, they would. You wouldn't have another chick to turn.
Yeah.
They don't. It's maybe we'll arrange a tour bus, come to Israel, and then we'll cross you over the border. See what happens to you. It's an incredible thing. It's an incredible thing the world doesn't see. But what are they fighting about? Imagine Khalid of Jews. Jews, we had our bitter times. You had in the Hasidic movement, in the Misnaglish movement. I mean, Chabad to this day will celebrate the day that their Rebbe was released from prison. Not one Rebbe, two Rebbes, three Rebbes, over and over and over. Why was he put in prison? Because of the other guys who didn't like him and put him in prison. But would you ever imagine that Jews would come and murder each other because of something? They would fight ugly. There were always ugly people in the Jewish people. People that I won't justify. People who did terrible things.
Before Israel was established.
But will they kill each other? That was one time in history. David Ben-Gurion and his famous murder of other Jews. He was responsible for shooting down the Altalena. If you're familiar with Jewish history, you're familiar with Altalena?
No.
Buried Altalena, do you know? Altalena was a boat. There were many organizations that were fighting against the British. And then in the early years of the state, were trying to gain control of who's going to run the country. You had the Haganah, which we're taught in our history are the best people that ever lived. Because David Ben-Gurion, the first Prime Minister of Israel, they were defensive, they were not offensive towards the British. You had an organization literally called the Irgun, which was really not the Irgun. It standed for Etzel, which was a warrior fighters. They were a nationalistic movement that we're not going to wait for the British to kill us and then we'll kill them. We're going to drive the British out of this country. We're not going to wait for the Arabs to kill us and then we'll go fight them. We're going to make sure they never. And that movement was led by a man, Menachem Begin. Menachem Begin's spiritual mentor was Jabotinsky. Right? Maybe some of this history gets put back together. And David Ben-Gurion and Menachem Begin were sworn enemies of each other. David Ben-Gurion being the antagonist in the story. He refused to make peace with Menachem Begin. When they got the British out, they finally decided, why don't we work together to make a united front? We'll have different politics, we'll have votes. David Ben-Gurion wouldn't hear of it. Menachem Begin personally brought over a ship, I believe it was from Europe, I remember France, if I'm not mistaken, called the Altalena, loaded with arms, guns, weapons, bombs, gunpowder, all kinds of ammunition that both sides really needed to fight with the Arabs that were now attacking them. And look what a hate can do for a person. Hate, remember the Biryonim in the times of the Talmud? The Biryonim, the Jewish community was able for 2.5 years to stay inside of the walls and they would have enough food. But you had these thugs that wanted to force the Jews to go to war, so they burned down all the storehouses. And those people caused for the temple to be destroyed. They looked like nationalists, but they were the enemies of the Jewish people.
Yeah.
At the very least, what you can do is steal Menachem Begin's boat. But David Ben-Gurion wouldn't have it. He pretended to call a peace treaty and had a meeting. And while Menachem Begin is out at sea, David Ben-Gurion gives orders to start firing at the ship. And he blew up the ship, the Altalena. And you see there were Jews who were getting shot by other Jews, and they were jumping into the ocean, and they raised the white flag and were surrendering, we're done, we're not, they wouldn't give in. And David Ben-Gurion, with blood on his hands, took over the prime ministership of the state of Israel. And that part of history is something that no one ever talks about. Because it's convenient not to talk about it. Someone just sent me a good quote. Someone asked Elie Wiesel if the Jews have a silent tradition. Things that we keep quiet. So Elie Wiesel said, yeah, of course, but we don't talk about it. There's certain things we like to brush under the rug, but it can happen to us also. So why don't Jews kill each other? Because it's not a value of ours to kill other people so they should believe in what we believe in. We don't have such a history. But other nations do. And the Kuzari cannot wrap his head around the fact that we don't have a similar history with him or other religions. So what does the rabbi answer back? Amar HaChaver, the rabbi responded, Lo yakum v'yigdal l'derech hazeh l'nimusim hasichliim. Only rational religions. What does it mean, rational religions? Not divine religions. Rational here is not meant in a positive way. Like man-made religions.
Yeah.
Asher hatchalata min ha'adam, that have originated from human sources, evolve this way. וכאשר ייגמר ויעזר יאמר כי הוא נעזר מן הבורא ומלומד והדומה לזה, אבל הנימוס אשר התחלתו מהבורא הוא קם פתאום. ואמר בו היה ויהי כבריאת העולם. Then when this type of religion succeeds, the founder will say that he was aided and taught by the creator and the like. On the other hand, a religion that actually originates from the creator will arise instantaneously. God just says, let it be, and it will be. Just like the creation of the universe. We don't have a person who pretended he was divine, and then when he got a following, he said he was divine. Hashem decided Judaism was going to start, and it did. Like Hashem says, the world should be created. V'yomer Elohim yehi or. God said there should be light. V'yehi or. By the way, some say the term in magic language. What do you say when you do a magic trick? Abracadabra. Abracadabra would mean Evra would create kedivra, the way I speak in Aramaic. Meaning Hashem said something that created the world. The first Lubavitch Rebbe writes on the Tanya that that's the way the world exists. We say Leolam Adonai Devarcha Nitzav B'Shamayim. We say in Rosh Hashanah Kippurim, Hashem, your words are always going to be in heaven. Meaning the words of Hashem, when Hashem said there should be light, He didn't say the word light and then there was light. Hashem said light. What does that mean? I have no idea what that means. But Hashem said there should be earth, water, water. Animals, but all of those are from Hashem's mouth. Amar HaKuzari. So what does the Kuzari respond? Now the Hebrew is much better than the English over here. Hivhalta otanu bidvarecha, chaver. Mashon Rabim. Oh, that's a good question. You astound me with your words, Rabbi. Astound, though, here means frightened. Yeah, it's a strange thing you just told me. What, overnight, God said there should be a religion and it happened? It's astounding. It's a terrifying thing to think about. But who was, Rachel pointed out a point. It says we. You astounded us. Who's us? It's just the king over here.
It says me here.
Right, but in Hebrew it says us. Otanu, us.
We're using the royal we now.
Vo, can you answer the question?
Well, I'm thinking that maybe the philosopher and the other religious leaders were also there.
Okay, tell me what else. How does your Rebbe talk about himself?
It's just the royal we now. Like it's
My Rebbe never says I, it says we.
Why?
Now there's a famous Hasidic story, and it's not why her Rebbe doesn't say I. Maybe not. I don't know. I never asked him, right?
Says I, he says we.
But there was a famous story. Someone knocked on the Rav Zusha of Anapoli's door, or the Royal Karlin on his door. And he knocked on the door and said, "Who's there?" He said, "It's I. It's me." He said, "Me? Oh, you should rent the door. Oh, Hashem." I mean, the only one who could say, "Me, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Ani Hashem Elokechem, I am Hashem your God." How can a human being answer and say I? Rav Zusha, for example, would never say I. He would always say, Rav Zusha needs this and Rav Zusha needs that. And Rav Zusha, he didn't want to say he was I. He wasn't a something. But I'm not convinced that that's where her Rebbe got it from. Rather, in the traditional world, and we lost this because in English there's no such thing. But in Hebrew, there is such a thing. In Yiddish, there is such a thing also. We speak to rabbis in third person. What does it mean third person? Whereas I'm not so particular. I asked her, I speak third person. It's Hayim Harav Rotzeh, does the rabbi want, which I believe is second person. Yeah, that's what it's called?
No, that's third person.
No.
No, Harav Rotzeh.
Harav Rotzeh is not third person.
You were second person.
You were second person.
So then what is...
He speaks.
Oh, sorry, the third person.
With the rabbi,
Now,
with the
that's
third
what I'm telling you.
person.
Not third person. Jews have a tradition not to speak in third person. Rather to speak in plural.
Both.
Would, and now in English we don't have such a thing, but atem rotzim, now you talk to one person, atem, or kavodchem, or mashlomchem, plural. Like you come to a person and you say, shalom alechem. What does alechem mean? You should say, shalom alecha. It's peace to you, not peace to all of you. What all of you? You speak to a person in Rabim. And I once asked for parrots, before you might appreciate this. I asked for parrots, I can't say it. He said, why? I said, because I'm lying. You're one person. How can I speak to you in plural? And you're all about truth. The parrot told me, you're mistaken. He said, because I am more than one person. Not him, God forbid. I was saying, when you speak to that important person, he's considered to carry the weight of more than just one person. And so you speak to him in plural. I said, Rabbi, I disagree with you, and I want to be strict about truth. And he laughed and nodded at me. So I always took it as a silent approval that I could say, would the rabbi want this, would the rabbi want that? But technically, if you ever see Rav Shlomo Carlebach, the way he would write, Kvotchem, Yudeo, always speak. So here he's saying, and you'll see the Kuzari always, Nashuva linanenu, now there he could be talking about both of them. But in general, a respectable person would speak about themselves in plural, not in singular.
There's a tradition somewhere where the monarch represents himself as we. It's the royal we.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
So that's what we do also. The same thing here. He's royalty, and he knows he's royalty.
But he still says, let us get back to the subject.
Us, meaning...
him and the rabbi.
That's what I wanted to say there. I thought Nashuv could mean just him, but Nashuv really means, let's get back to the subject. And this is what the Kuzari is asking, and with this question we're going to end off. There's a whole other shiur next week. By the way, next week I have to say is a beautiful shiur, God willing, if I say so myself. There's a halakha and the Rambam we're going to be taking apart, and a philosophy from the Zohar. The Zohar tells us, and one piece of Zohar, one piece of Zohar Chadash, and we're going to end off, God willing, with a piece from Rav Kook in Orot. And you're going to see Rav Kook's inspiration for writing something is going to come from a very long, thought-out piece of the Kuzari that most people would never know to connect. But Rabbi Sharkey connects it all for us. But let's end off with the question for today. Says the Kuzari, I need an explanation for what you're saying. How does anything happen overnight? How does anything happen overnight? How does a religion start overnight? What does it mean? The concept of created light overnight, maybe that's a hard enough concept to understand. But a religion with people to happen overnight, how does such a thing happen? And you would think again that the rabbi would start talking to us about Sinai. And he doesn't. He's going to start telling us about Egypt, and the Jews in Egypt, and the 10 plagues, and leaving Egypt. So what does that have to... He starts telling him the history of the Jewish people. And again, we're going to come to an unshakable stance of the Kuzari. The Kuzari's rule, the Jewish people in the Torah are not separable. You cannot separate between the Torah and the Jewish people. Torah is only in existence because of the Jewish people. And the Jewish people only exist because of the Torah. The moment someone who's not Jewish wants to teach Torah, learn Torah, he will never receive an empowering experience the way a Jew does. When a person wants to see Torah, you can only see Torah through the lens of the Jewish people. And therefore Jewish history will always shed light on the Torah, because the Torah, unlike other people who think, the Torah, according to the Kuzari, is not a universal book. The Torah is a book that was tailor-fit only for the Jewish people. And there may be ideals there that seem universal, but next week we're going to discuss that even those universal ideals are not really universal. Because Hashem could have only given them to the Jewish people. And if were Hashem, God forbid, to ever give the Torah to another people, He wouldn't be able to give them our Torah. He would have to write a new Torah for them. Because our Torah only fits the Jewish people. Only fits our souls, only fits our minds, only fits our bodies. And B'ezrat Hashem, we're going to discover all about that next week, God willing.
I think it's a very classic class.
Thank you.
I love this class.